In July of 2010, a ruptured pipeline spilled over 1 million gallons of oil into the Kalamazoo River. Over the past decade, more than $1 billion has been spent to repair the damage. And one wildlife biologist is checking in on the turtles he helped to save a decade ago.
The race continues to clean up the massive oil spill traveling through the Kalamazoo River.
We were having an unfolding disaster that just nobody was prepared for. The local government, the state, Enbridge, nobody had any clue as to what we were going to endure.
Being in mid-Michigan, you never thought you'd have to deal with a huge oil spill.
The cause of the spill? A 6-foot rupture in a pipeline called Line 6B in a creek near Marshall, Michigan.
When I saw it, I didn't know what to think. It was beyond scale of anything we had ever heard.
As a resident who lives here, I was heartbroken when it happened, really devastated. My favorite river was blackened.
For 17 hours, pipeline operators in Alberta, Canada didn't realize they had a spill, and they let the oil flow. The U.S. EPA estimates 1.2 million gallons of oil were released, fouling 40 miles of the Kalamazoo River. From wildlife to plants and trees, everything was coated in slick black oil. At the time, it was the second largest inland oil spill in U.S. history.
From the very beginning, it looked like absolute devastation. It looked hopeless.
All of the surrounding wetlands and all of the surrounding shoreline were completely saturated.
You're just like, how is anything going to survive? How are the fish going to survive? How are the inverts going to survive? How are the bugs going to survive? I don't know.
In the days following the spill, hundreds of workers from Enbridge and the state and federal governments converged on the area to contain the spill and begin cleanup efforts.
At some point, it turns from response, which is just to get out as much of the oil as possible. It turns into monitoring and restoration.
Michelle DeLong is a project manager for the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy. In 2010, she was tasked with facilitating communication between the EPA and Enbridge.
It was difficult to see. I happened to live nearby. It's part of my local community as well. It's painful to see that, and it was, it just felt like an ongoing onslaught for quite a while there.
Early in the process, a daunting discovery. In addition to floating on the surface, some of the oil had sunk to the bottom and contaminated the soil. Restoring this ecosystem would mean digging out miles of riverbank and rebuilding the environment piece by piece. Dead trees and logs serve an important role to the ecosystem as a home and shelter for much of the river's wildlife. So over 3,500 items like oiled logs and fallen trees were cataloged and swapped out for clean replacements.
And when they would remove woody material, they would take GPS points and they would take a minimum amount of information about, what it was, how large it was, and sort of specifics on its location. So we really were looking at a subset of that and trying to figure out the locations where the ecological lift would be greatest to restore some wood material, and that's what we focused on.
Experts were brought in to clean the mammals, birds, and turtles, including veterinarians from Michigan zoos and specialists in the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Wildlife biologist Josh Otten worked for a company Enbridge hired to help with the cleanup. He focused his efforts on the turtles.
Some of them were so oiled that they couldn't even open their mouth. You'd have to clean the oil off to get to their mouth. So some of those things, I'm like, there's no way the animals would have survived. And then enough of the ones that you saw that were so heavily oiled that actually came in dead, it makes you think that if you don't do anything, they're probably going to perish.
Some of these turtles can live to 70 years old, and they play a key role in the river's ecosystem. Without them, no restoration could succeed. But a small army of volunteers showed up to help.
All of these people came together to come up with these various plans on how to essentially return the area to better than it was before. Without them, like, I don't know what would have happened, because every day there would be 20 new people that would show up and they would work there all day long. We eventually got to a point where we were collecting 100 turtles a day that were impacted by the oil.
Around 2,000 turtles were captured and cleaned in 2010 using a mix of dish soap and water. Many were hand cleaned with toothbrushes and Q-tips.
You could kind of peel some of the oil off, but somebody would just sit there meticulously, just scrubbing at the turtle, getting on all the little cracks.
To clean out any oil the turtles may have swallowed, volunteers used a surprising method. They fed the turtles mayonnaise.
A lot of the animals were given mayonnaise mixture to kind of flush their internal system, because, you know, we were unsure of how much oil that the animal had ingested. You could see oil in its mouth. This was thought to be the best method to kind of try to get rid of any of that internal oiling as well. And then eventually, you know, maybe it took a day, maybe it took 2 or 3 cleanings to get all the oiling off that individual turtle. The vet would look at that individual to make sure that it was clear of all the oil, make sure that it was clear of any other medical issues.
Once a veterinarian cleared a turtle for release, another problem arose.
Turtles have such a high degree of site fidelity, meaning they know where home is. They want to get back to home.
Problem was, early on, the turtle's home was still contaminated with oil. So the turtles were released in similar habitats in the same watershed to where they were found.
We wanted to release them in a location that they could potentially eventually come back if they really wanted to. And so that's why we tried to keep things in that same watershed.
After leaving the Kalamazoo River in 2011, Josh always wondered about the animals he treated there.
The thing that really kind of gnaws at your brain is, what's going to happen to the turtle?
Now Josh is back on the river studying turtles again, this time working toward his PhD at the University of Toledo.
The really great thing to see is now, 10 years after the fact, I'm out there surveying these areas and I'm recatching turtles that we had caught in 2010, that we had cleaned up, that we had marked, and here the animal is, put on growth, it's got a larger shell, it weighs more. So I know that all of that work that we did was worthwhile.
And it's not just the turtles that have survived and recovered. Much of the wildlife and vegetation has flourished, and people are back in their canoes and kayaks.
All of that cleanup work helped. The river's beautiful now.
Even after 10 years, the recovery of the Kalamazoo River is in its early stages, and the long-term impacts of the spill are still unfolding. At Great Lakes Now, we aim to cover the Great Lakes region and the people who live here, like you. Please follow us on social media, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and sign up for our newsletter at greatlakesnow.org.